love listening to you, Zolak.
Well, thank you so much. How do you pronounce your last name?
Ebua.
Well, thank you for joining us, Bob, and I share some of the same sentiments that Barry shared earlier. We really appreciate you joining us.
Yeah. Pro Fan Sports Podcast. Let's get it. Pro fans, tune into the program. Every single week, get the dope, fam. Sean on the mic, very flat too. Keep you updated, that's what we do. Pro fans, tune into the program. Pro fans, tune into the program. Pro fans, tune into the program. Every single week, get the dope, fam.
Well, welcome back, everybody. Welcome back to Pro Fan Sports Podcast. And today we are joined by the voice of the Patriots, the one and only Bob Socci. Thank you for joining us, Bob.
Vladimir, thanks for having me. It's good to be with you and Barry right now to talk a little bit about the Patriots and, this NFL season, which obviously has reached its most exciting point.
Oh, yeah. And
that's right. Yes, sir.
We had a very exciting game on Saturday. I mean, the results might not have been exciting, but the leading up to that game was a big game for all of us. And unfortunately, like I said, the results were not the best, but it's just been an exciting season as a Patriots fan in general. How has the season been for you, Bob?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, especially in the wake of last year, because of not only the struggles of the team in 2020, after so many seasons in which the Patriots were in the playoffs, and not only in the playoffs, but of course, for the most part, advanced deep in the playoffs to at least an AFC championship game. I started calling the Pats in 2013, and they made the AFC championship every season until they lost the wild card after the 2019 season. And of course, during that time, went to 4 Super Bowls. So I was spoiled right from the start and throughout my tenure. And then in 2020, of course, we all went into the pandemic, and the NFL played a season through the first waves of the COVID experience. And they did it in front of empty stadiums. We didn't travel as a broadcast team, so we were calling every game from Foxborough, either with the players on the field and no fans in the stands, or watching it off television while they were in Miami, in Los Angeles, and Buffalo, and everywhere else they had to go last year, Kansas City, et cetera, in the NFL. And so, to go through a season like that, as strange as it was, as surreal as it was, but also as disappointing as it was, with a 7-9 finish, non-playoff team, and frankly, a team that had a lot of flaws and really struggled. I think that has made this recent success, 7 wins in a row before Saturday night. And as you touched on, I think the pregame excitement, the anticipation of playing meaningful games in December, big Saturday night game on the road, as poorly as the Pats played early on in that game. Still, I mean, it's something that you really have to appreciate. And I think I do more than anything because of what we all experienced last year for the Pats.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think, I share that same sentiment that you just shared with last year being such an off year compared to our previous years. And I feel as though there was a point last year where I lost the excitement that I usually get before a Patriots game, just because the offense was just so tough to watch. And this year, getting that momentum back. I mean, earlier in the year, I think I was still feeling the same way that I felt last year, not knowing exactly where the team was going to go. But as we progress throughout the year, it's just been an incredible turnaround by Bill Belichick and the team in general, just seeing where we are at now.
Yeah, they made a lot of changes, as we know, in the offseason. They spent a lot of money in free agency. They certainly invested draft picks in some spots where they needed immediate help, especially the quarterback position, although they had signed Cam and brought him back with the intention of at least having him as the potential starter. If they drafted a young quarterback, then they would have that bridge to him in the future. And Mac kind of accelerated, I think, the plan for him to become the starting quarterback based on how well he performed in the classroom, the meeting room, and on the practice field. And then, of course, in the preseason. But along with that, he still had to acclimate all those new players and build a chemistry with so many free agents at tight end, at wide receiver, on the defensive side of the ball, in the front seven especially, as well as in the secondary with Jalen Mills, of course, being a key acquisition. And I think that it took time. And they played against a really difficult schedule early on when you consider that they had Tampa Bay and Dallas, even New Orleans at the time. You know, that defense for the Saints, as we just saw against Tampa Bay, I think is overlooked. And they were terrific against the Patriots in week 3 before the Pats had to deal with Tom Brady and the Buccaneers the following week. And at 2-4, you know, this is a team that was at a crossroads. And I think all those things that were holding them back, you know, the inability to come up with a key third down stop, converting at least with enough regularity in the red zone, and starting to find an offensive chemistry. We started to see signs of that. They had a big blowout win over the Jets. I think they gained a lot of confidence out of that. They won against the Chargers, a good team on the road, and I think they got a lot more confidence out of that game especially. And, you know, they had it rolling. Now, they came out on Saturday night, and they looked like the team early in the season. They had trouble stopping the run, of course, throughout the night. But I think for the most part, it was just, you know, there was a flatness there, and the players talked about that. It was like two teams were playing at different speeds. And I would expect them against the Bills, you know, that with so much on the line, that they're going to come out more of a team that resembles what we saw during the 7-game winning streak than what we saw in the first quarter in particular against Indianapolis.
Well, thank you. Yeah, thank you for touching on the game last Saturday. But I think, you know, let's talk a little bit more about the game and leading to that game and get into the game. I feel as though there was a lot of momentum for the Patriots, and a lot of people believe that that's a game that the Patriots could win against a very strong Colts team. But they came out and they hit us in the mouth early, and we basically could never get back into the game. And, you know, there's talk about the team not being ready. As you talked about, the players were saying they had a bad week of practice leading to the game, and that might have resulted into this. How strange is that a Bill Belichick team, after a bye week, was not ready to play a very meaningful game in the middle of the season?
Well, I think it's unexpected, and it certainly is strange when you consider the track record for Belichick teams. But that's why I say they kind of went back to the 2-4 Patriots that we saw early in the year. And I mentioned a couple of factors, but there were more, and I think even most significantly on special teams. They had another punt blocked, and this one was recovered for a touchdown. It was such an instrumental play, I think, in the way the Colts, you know, really had things ramped up early on Saturday night. They get the scoring drive. They run 7 plays for 70 yards, and then they get officially a touchdown pass on the trick play to go in front 7-0. And then the Patriots do little with their next series, and then they have the blocked punt. And you see a breakdown like that from a Belichick team, and it's one block punt like that. And it wasn't anything that was schemed up by Indianapolis. It was just really, you know, the failure to block a guy inside. They didn't have a punt rush on. It was just a breakdown that you don't expect from a Belichick coach team. And when you see that once, it's strange. When you see it 3 times in a season, as we've witnessed with the Patriots, they've had 3 punts blocked this year. That's extremely out of the ordinary. You know, and
leads the league.
Yeah, and I mean, they had 3 punts blocked, I believe, from 2012 through last season combined.
Wow, that's crazy.
So it's, you know, and penalties. And you go back to the Patriots' first series in the game Saturday night, and as bad as it was, down 20-0, you know, the Pats had a chance really to change the complexion of the game right away from what it turned out to be early on, because they have a 1st and 10 at the Colts 48, and then they start to go backwards. They have a penalty, they have a sack where they lose substantial yardage, and they have to punt, and then the Colts have that aforementioned touchdown drive with the trick play to take the early lead. And the Patriots repeatedly hurt themselves with uncharacteristic mistakes penalties. They had another couple of issues on special teams. Ganowski fumbled on a punt return. Luckily, it went out of bounds. But they also had an offsides by Brandon King on a missed field goal, and that allowed the Colts to get a reboot. Bad pun, no pun intended, 5 yards closer, and they make it. So you talk about a block punt for a touchdown, the penalty that nullifies a missed field goal, that's 10 points right there for the Colts and special teams. And so I thought what we saw Saturday night for much of the game were the Patriots, again, making a lot of the mistakes that you don't expect from a Belichick coach team, but yet that we witnessed early in the season and we didn't see through the 7-game winning streak.
I have one more question before I head it to Barry to ask any question
please.
that he has. So why is that? Why is that happening where a Bill Belichick coach team is making so many mistakes, especially on special team, which as we all know, Belichick started as a special team coach, and that's something he values a lot, and you have guys like Brendan Bolden on the team. He's been on the team for a long time because he's such a great special team guy. And why is there so many mistakes? Is it because we have so many new guys compared to the year before, and just we don't have the same amount of veteran in the team anymore? Why do you think that is?
Well, I think, for the first few weeks, you could say, well, the team is either young or they're largely a new team with all the turnover. But I think by this point, week 15, especially when they corrected a lot of the issues they faced, I don't think that really holds a lot of water. So I think for me, now, there are situations like with the block punt where maybe some personnel changes. Mike Reese, the great reporter from ESPN, pointed out, for example, that Calvin Munson was just released by the team, that Juwan Bentley got hurt in the game against the Colts. And I do think that was a significant loss defensively, but also, again, maybe in an area that we really didn't, appreciate in special teams. And that forced the Patriots to kind of mix and match a little bit, perhaps, on their special teams unit. So I think there are factors like that, certainly. But you don't expect the Patriots to have a low-energy week of practice this late in the year, knowing the importance of the games, but also understanding the ability of the opponent. And I think as we're talking about the Pats, it's important to stress the Colts are a good team, and they're well coached. Mm-hmm. And I think they've been playing extremely well. They've won 7 of their last 9. And they match up well with the Pats. They're fast defensively, but yet I think they're also physical too. They have a physical defensive line. They have a very physical offensive line. And I think they have a head coach who, kind of seems to have the magic touch as a play caller. He's a very consistent personality in Frank Reich, but also I think a very smart play caller. And he's obviously had a lot of success against the Patriots with the Eagles and now the Colts.
Yeah, Frank Reich was a second choice, but he seems like the right choice for now.
I think so. Yeah. They're looking at a third playoff trip in 4 years with 4 different quarterbacks.
Yeah.
Wow, that's crazy. I didn't realize that, but no, I brought up certainly some great points about that. I agree with, and but particularly the point that you said, and something when I was watching the game that really stood out to me. Were a couple things. One was, like you said, how fast the Colts were, especially defensively. I think that really bothered the, Patriots offense was the speed. I think that, definitely caught them off guard, and, and they probably didn't really, anticipate or didn't realize like how fast of a defense they were, going to be going against, because usually defenses that like are fast aren't, what I'm saying, as physical, because they're smaller, so they have they have guys that can move and stuff, but not tackle as well. But I mean, as we saw, not only were they fast as far as getting to the ball and pursuing the football and getting to Mac Jones and rushing the passer, but also they were physical and they hit hard. They hit the Patriots and the mouth. They had some pretty big hits and really even a couple guys got banged up on the Patriots, and I think that definitely goes to show how physical and tough that defense is, and certainly how underrated they are, because I knew they were solid and decent, but I didn't think that they were as good as we saw on Saturday night. But I certainly wanted to ask you, Bob, because I mean it was a pretty bad night for the most part offensively. What went wrong offensively, and also in between the trenches where the game was lost really on both sides? Like, what did you see that, the Patriots didn't do well and weren't able to execute?
Yeah, no, I haven't really thoroughly studied the tape as we talk the way some of my colleagues have already. But to me, again, based on what I saw live and in the sense you got watching the game, but also with a little bit of study going back and rewatching some plays, I think the speed was a factor. And I think you combine that with what we've heard from players about low energy in practices last week and, not being on the same page at times. It was clearly apparent. The first play, for example, of the third quarter, they hand off to Ramondre Stevenson. And this was pointed out by Greg Bedard on Twitter, but I've seen some other people refer to it. And then when you watch it yourself, you can clearly see that the offensive line isn't on the same page. You've got some guys run blocking, and Trent Brown is in a pass set, and Stevenson is kind of running behind Teddy Karras, looking as if he's hiding behind Karras. It's just a play that suggests that there was confusion there. And I think that it was the first time outside of Buffalo where they played in a hostile environment, but also in the domed environment for the Patriots against the Colts. It was very loud there. Although there were a lot of Patriots
Surprisingly.
fans. Yeah, very.
Oh, really?
And I think that.
Wow.
Yeah, and I don't. Players and coaches are going to downplay the noise, but I think in combination with being sped up by the Colts, and also frustration starts to mount. You get in the red zone. You get inside the 5-yard line. It's loud down there. You're enclosed in the stand, in the stadium, and now you're tight to the crowd. The fans are right on top of the field there. So Michael Owenu has the false start, which backs up the Patriots, of course, before they kick the field goal at the 9-minute mark. And so I think there are a lot of variables there. But I think most of all, I think a lot of it has to do with the credit to the Colts for a good game plan, for an aggressive game plan. They played with a sense of urgency. They looked like a team that took advantage of the bye to get revived. They looked like a team that played a little bit desperate too early on. Now they were able to overcome a terrible performance by the quarterback Carson Wentz. And Jonathan Taylor is a tremendous player. He's really impressive.
But
and it's just not the numbers or the long gains like the 67-yard run. To me, it's some of those 5, 6, 7-yard runs where he runs into the heart of the line and it looks like, okay, that's a yard gain. Next thing you know, the pile's still going and you're ready to call the play dead, but they're still moving bodies, So it was an impressive performance by him. The Colts are a good team, and as I said, I think it's just a difficult matchup, and the Patriots really weren't firing off the ball offensively, and I think Matt got sped up. And that was a factor in some of the problems they had early on offensively.
No, for sure. I certainly, agree with with those points. You're pretty spot on with that. Certainly the Colts had a good game plan, and executed it very well. And we're ready to play, and and they came. They came out hungry. They came out like they were ready to play. They were the tougher, the more physical, the team that really won the battle on both sides and in the trenches, and that literally just pushed the Patriots around and went wherever they wanted to go. Particularly Jonathan Taylor. Like I was watching the game and I was noticing. They were saying that this guy was getting, particularly on first down, like 7 yards a carry, which is, incredible. That's remarkable. When a guy gets to 7 yards a carry on first down, so, now you're in second and third in shorts and manageables, and that, when you're able to run the football like that, I mean, that just makes life easier for not only Carson Wentz, but the whole offense in general. And, it's just, it was definitely concerning on how the Patriots weren't able to stop the run, because we thought that they had figured that out and that they were, they had gotten better and improved, on their run defense. And so, they had a few games that they struggled, like the Tennessee game, they struggled to stop the run, but they, certainly, struggled there. And, it was just kind of surprising to see that. Usually a Bill Belichick team doesn't let the other team's best player beat them. They usually at least, kind of slow down and like limit, you know what I'm saying, him and not let him just go off and, and go crazy like we did. So I was like surprising that, the Patriots, well, maybe they came up with the game but didn't execute their game plan, whatever that was, and, being able to stop Jonathan Taylor. I mean, even as great as he is, that was certainly something surprising to me.
I
now,
agree with you, Barry.
so,
I was just going to quickly add it. I was surprised by that too, and because of the Tennessee game, a lot of people wondered, well, how can they stop the Colts? And I was asked that Friday on our station, and I said, to me, I'd be surprised if Bill Belichick makes something a priority, and the Patriots at least don't limit him. And it was clear that priority one for the Patriots was containing Jonathan Taylor, and I think the stat was out there that the Pats had gone into games under Belichick 20 times with the other team having 1,000-yard rusher going into the game. And the Patriots were 18-2 in the previous 20 games, and I think the opposing back, the 1,000-yard rusher, averaged around 75 yards. Well, obviously, Taylor blew past that, and, the Patriots were down by a big margin early. So it really was very much in contrast to what we've seen again, when the Patriots have gone against these 1,000-yard backs, and Belichick's defense is set out to stop the run first and foremost.
No, for sure. Absolutely. Yeah, that's, usually how it is. And even though it wasn't like that Saturday, but usually they are, pretty much, the priority is to stop the run. And they tried, stacking, the box, and it was like they tried everything they could, and they just couldn't stop them. But I mean, I guess that goes to show how great of a running back Jonathan Taylor is, and how tough he is to stop and be able to bring down. Like you were saying, Bob, that even after that initial contact, he still keeps his feet moving, and and is able to push the pile and and get those extra yards. He's good at at that, and also protecting the football too, because like I'm sure that there were a few times I saw them trying to strip the ball out and trying to cause a fumble, and he was able to do a good job protecting the football and and securing it. So he's certainly an MVP candidate. To me, the best running back in the league this year, and it's an awfully tough player to stop. So, but I also wanted to ask you about your thoughts on what you've seen from Mac Jones this year, and how you think the Patriots coaching staff has coached him and been able to help him develop throughout from the start of the season to what we've seen from him now.
Yeah, I think they've really done a great job overall. Josh McDaniels in particular, who's worked with him most closely, of course, as the offensive coordinator. Develop as a rookie, I think that it's interesting. He's at that point of the season now where he'll be judged, because this team was the first seed going into Saturday night, or at least last week before Kansas City won. They're a playoff caliber team, and so what happens the rest of the regular season and then the playoffs will determine, I guess, how he's going to be judged for his rookie year overall. But to me, I can't imagine that anybody who would look at it objectively would say to this point he has not exceeded expectations. I mean, this was the sixth quarterback taken in the draft, and while a lot of people said he was the most pro ready, and that it was a good fit, if not a perfect fit, with the Patriots, for him, nonetheless, to consider a rookie quarterback coming into this league with a team that really struggled offensively last year, and early on this season had a lot of problems trying to protect the quarterback. The offensive line took some time to come together. Certainly I think it was a big factor in the 2-4 start. The tight ends, the wide receivers took some time to develop some cohesiveness and chemistry. I think they're still working on that. And they didn't run the ball well early on against teams like New Orleans and Tampa Bay, for example. And so he had to go toe-to-toe with Tom Brady and Dak Prescott the following week, and more than held his own. And when he made mistakes, like the interception return for a touchdown by Trayvon Diggs, he came back and threw a touchdown. And now what I think we've seen is that in some games, people have said, well, he didn't play well for most of the game, but then he finished strong. The Chargers, for example, the first 3 quarters, it was a bit of a struggle, but then the fourth quarter, he was fantastic when the Patriots put that game away. And to me, similar on Saturday night, there were a lot of issues in the game early. The 2 interceptions, one going into the half with the team in the red zone, the other coming out of the half. That first possession where he was late on the throw to Bolden, picked off by a Karake. But nonetheless, he finished really strong. And to me, that's a great sign for this young quarterback who, like I said, I think has been developed very well. They haven't asked him to do too much. And when he's faced adversity, when he's faced the prospect of failure, he hasn't wilted. He certainly took some shots against the Colts and bounced back up. And I think there's toughness there. I think there's leadership. He sent a message, it seemed, after the game when he talked about the low energy at practice last week. And he made sure that he started with himself. And I think that was impressive, too. That, this is a guy who wasn't afraid to say we got to be accountable. And he started with himself. And I think that empowers him a little more when it comes to his teammates. If you're pointing the finger at those guys first and not yourself first, well, it may ring hollow. But I think in his case, he did it the right way after the game on Saturday night.
Yeah, definitely.
Sure.
Definitely. We spent most of the time talking about the season and the last game that the Patriots played. I want us to sort of look forward, look ahead to the next couple of games. They have the Bills, the Dolphins, and what's the last team that they have?
You got Jacksonville in between.
Jacksonville.
Jacksonville after the Bills.
And the Bills is the next game, and the Bills just won against Carolina over the weekend, and their coach were in the locker room saying, hey, we know who's next. We know who's going to be next. So we know they're looking forward to that game. So, and that's not going to be an easy game because even the last game, even though we won and we only threw 3 times, it was still a pretty close game. So what do you think we're going to do? Not only in the Bills game, but also playing down in Miami is not something that we've done well in, right? We've always had a hard time playing in Miami and winning in Miami. So how do you think we're gonna do with those last 3 games? Is it 2-1, 1-2, or is it 0-3? What do you think about the record that we're gonna have within the last 3 games, and how do you think we're gonna play against those last 3 teams?
Yeah, I think a lot of it depends, and this is a bit of a cop-out from me. I think a lot of it depends on how they hold up physically these next 3 weeks. We know that in the Colts game, Nelson Aguilar had the head injury. N'Keal Harry got banged up. And then on Monday, Kendrick Bourne was put on the COVID list. Now, I'm not sure whether he's vaccinated or unvaccinated and how that could affect his status on Sunday against the Bills if he were to have a couple of negative tests and he was vaccinated, he could come back. But it's we're in this season where teams, it seems like with COVID, it's claimed large numbers of teammates suddenly, as we've seen with several teams in the last week, but also injuries. And the Patriots kind of got healthy a couple of weeks ago. It seemed like they really got back to full health and were about as healthy as they had been. And then Damian Harris got hurt against the Bills, and they had the injuries the other night against the Colts. So I think that's always a big factor. I could see this team going 3-0. I could see them going 2-1. I could see them going 1-2. I don't see them going 0-3. But I do think, strangely enough, I mean, maybe I'm overconfident about Sunday. I think the Patriots, first of all, are going to play a lot better. I think we heard Matthew Slater after the game the other night. We heard Mac Jones. And I think, as much as guys talked about having a 2-4 mindset when they won 7 straight, well, there's nothing like, the performance they had on Saturday night to really bring back that 2-4 mindset. They were humbled a bit. And I think that, they'll bounce back with the effort we expect from them against the Bills. And I also think they match up well with the Bills. And I think Indianapolis, like I said, was a tougher matchup. I think, Sean McDermott's got to get over that psychological hump, it seems, coaching against Belichick. I think Josh Allen still has not played. And again, this is going to sound crazy because I thought he played pretty well for the most part in the Monday night game. But when his team really needed him to play great, he struggled. And I think he's still looking for that great game against Belichick that isn't an end-of-the-season game in 2020 when the Patriots were done and that team was a shell of its former self. Because I think, that game for the Patriots really meant very little. And I think, on Saturday night, it's a big test for the Bills. And I think they've got a lot of the same issues they had a few weeks ago. Their offensive line is not playing well. I think the Patriots can get to Allen and put a lot of pressure on him, but they can't allow him to do what Tampa Bay did and escape and run so effectively, and even on design runs. The Bills are not a physical football team on either side of the ball the way Indianapolis is. So I think for the Patriots, it's a much better matchup. And then, Jacksonville is Jacksonville, and then you get to Miami, and you're absolutely right. The history there is what it is. Now, maybe with Mac Jones as the quarterback, it's a little different than when Tom Brady was playing down in Miami. Even though he's the greatest of all time, we know that Miami was kind of like his kryptonite as a member of the Patriots. So we'll see.
Well, let's hope that we do get back on the horse and we can hopefully win out those 3 games, because there are huge playoff expectations around these games. So yeah. Well, welcome to the podcast, John. We talked about the season in general, the last game, and we're talking about the game ahead now. Bob, this is John, our other co-host. Say hi to Bob, John.
Bob, thank you. I'm sure these guys have thanked you for coming on. So thanks again for coming on. And I know you guys already talked the Colts. But I did want to bring it back a little bit because I felt like I saw something uncharacteristic that, from a Patriots player. Mac Jones, after the game, after the Colts game, was pretty critical, of, the players, saying that, they didn't have a good week and they were feeling sorry for themselves. And to me, I thought like you're a rookie, to me, I don't really see that much. What did you think about that? Like, do you think he was put up to that maybe?
John, I think it was interesting. And we were talking about that a little bit, and it's good to see you and good to talk to you.
See you.
I think that, it was interesting to me. I think first of all, he did it the right way because he made sure it started with him. He said it starts with me. And it's been interesting because I think as a rookie, you don't expect somebody to be a leader. But as a quarterback, you have to be a leader. And I think one of the things that has enabled him to gain the immediate respect of so many teammates is his ability to lead. When Trent Brown talked about him, going back to the preseason, he said, Mac one day in a practice didn't like the way we ran a play. So he called us back in the huddle and said, we're going to run it again, even before the coaches could tell him to do that. Ted Karras last week, when I asked Ted Karras about Mac Jones, said, great leader of men. I think Matthew Slater has said something even similar to that, or maybe it was Matthew who had those words as well. And we hear guys like Matt Slater and Devin McCourty talk about Jones the way that they do. To me, it seems like he may be a rookie officially. I mean, this is his first year in the NFL, but his teammates don't view him that way. And then I think it also comes with the position. But I also thought it was interesting that afterwards, some of the things Matthew Slater said, basically that the performance on special teams was unacceptable. And that also, they made a lot of uncharacteristic mistakes. And I think he more or less called into question, the focus and the concentration of last week. And then Bill Belichick on Monday morning on one of the local radio stations was asked about Mac's comments. And Bill said essentially that they had a lack of focus during the week in practice, and there was a lot of little things. And so I think, that was reflected by their overall performance. And therefore, as uncharacteristic as it was for, somebody to say that, particularly as a rookie in the post-game press conference, it seems to me that, the veteran spokespeople, speaking of Slater and of course Belichick, the head coach, more or less confirmed it, and for lack of a better expression, had his back on it, and then to me that says, okay, it's going to resonate well in there, and the message has been sent, and I said earlier, again, that he started with himself, which was the right way to do it.
Yeah, I mean, although it was surprising, I really liked it, because I'm like, that's how you take a hold of your team, right? That's, if you're going to do anything, you got to step out there and, you got to take that leadership role. Another uncharacteristic thing I saw was today, Bill Belichick was at a press conference, and he apologized for being short with the media. I've never seen that before, because he's short every week. So I'm like, why not? What is going on with that? Like, what do you think about that?
You think Bill is going to therapy and he's learning how to apologize?
What is happening?
The softer side of Bill, yeah.
Maybe.
It's interesting. I was shocked because we've seen and heard Bill, especially after losses, be very, very short with the media, and I thought that the other night it was in more rare form. But I again have sat in some of those press conferences before where it's been uncomfortable, and people have asked questions, and Bill has essentially said the same thing. We didn't coach well, we didn't play well, we didn't do anything well enough to win the game, and I was surprised that he said what he said on Monday. I wonder, John, if part of it is that he was so angry and frustrated by some of the things we just talked about, that Mac Jones said, that Devin McCourty said, David Andrews said, December, 8 penalties, 2 turnovers, plus the block punt. You're not going to win many football games like that. Maybe, Bill recognized in the post-game press conference, he was so irritated with his team, he took it out more than, than he'd like to on the media. Some people surmise that, he was reminded, hey, that this press group has been really good to you all season long and the last couple of years, despite the struggles of the team in 2020. But I just think it was, maybe looking back on Saturday night, in some ways too, the way everything went down, and Bill just wanted to set a different tone this week. I don't want to say it was a humbling experience to get beat by the Colts the way they did, to play the way they did, I think, more than anything. But I think he recognized that, he was really more irritated about the performance of his team, upset with his team, that, based on what we've heard from, Mac Jones and some of those guys, and what Bill had to say Monday morning as well in his local radio interview.
Yeah. Just to be respectful of Bob's time, I think we can each have one last question, and then we can finish this thing. Do you guys want to go and ask one last question?
Another thing I saw was Mac Jones today at the press conference. He was being asked a lot about the Colts, and he shut that thing down, and I'm like, is Mac Jones turning that corner? Listen, I've had enough of this right here. We you guys got to start respecting you when I'm telling you we're done with this.
John, it's funny because I have mixed feelings about that. The one thing about that interview is he was talking to 2 ex-players, one baseball player, Lou Merlone, the other, former Patriot, Christian Fourier. So that, the thing is that he had enough of the questions from guys who been in those shoes, so to speak. But I think it's, I think it's taking a cue from Belichick and the way the Patriots do business. It's time to move on. Mac said the other night too, I think one of the things that he said after the game in Indianapolis, we got to flush it down the toilet. And he really meant it.
Yeah.
But yeah. And I think too, that, there's a way, and he's probably going to learn, that there's a way to handle yourself in an interview like that. Tom was always, Tom was so good at it. When Tom didn't want to answer questions, or Tom didn't want to say anything, he had this very smooth and masterful way usually of doing so, of either ending the interview or changing the subject. And I think Mac will learn that, more smoothly, more, with a little more experience than saying, essentially, I mean, if you don't have any more questions for me, I really, or I don't really want to talk about Indianapolis anymore. To me, again, I think, he's a rookie, and as a rookie, he's gotten it right away in terms of what the Patriots are about and how they approach things. And, when he said Saturday night, we got to flush it down the toilet, he meant it on Monday as well.
That's for sure. Facts.
One last question, Barry.
Well, I was hoping I'd get the last one since
sure.
Usually, I'm the the one that usually gets that spot. So
that's okay,
Barry.
That's okay.
Barry's got the anchor leg, huh? He crosses the finish line with the baton.
Right. As I like to say, I'm the closer.
Okay.
You're the closer. All right, Mario. Well, I shouldn't say a Yankee name. Jeez.
No, I was thinking of him too, but I wasn't going to say it. Hey,
Deron Harmon, the closer for the Patriots.
There you go. Right.
No problem.
Deron Harmon, yeah.
No problem, Barry. So my last question for you, Bob, is about your co-host when you're calling the Patriots.
Oh boy.
I mean, it's a pretty simple question, which I'm sure you have asked all the time. What is it like working with Zoe and Zoe stepping all over you when you're calling the game? And
I see him grabbing him like, relax.
Yeah, that's actually the guy who's grabbing him is actually our producer, Mark Capello, who sits between us. And that's like one of Mark's big jobs at home games is he's got the chair that slides so that he can slide over and give Zoe the Heisman the stiff arm.
I just wanted to.
Oh, that's awesome.
I just wanted to hear, just tell us a little bit about working with Zoe and calling the game with Zoe, the bigger than life energy that he brings, and how fun that's been for you.
Yeah, Vladimir, that's a question I get more than anything else.
I'm sure.
And honestly, I tell people all the time. It's exactly the way you would imagine it is, because you're right. He brings all that energy. He's a guy that he's been around the Patriots for such a long time, and he knows so much about the Patriots. He's a great football analyst, which I think sometimes gets lost because of the emotion that he shows, and sometimes the reaction. After the touchdown, for example, the other night when Taylor ran 67 yards and. He gets to the end zone, and I think I said something like, "Oh, well, that's the ball game," and Zoe's like, "That sucks." He's a fan, but he's also the guy who's been a quarterback in the NFL, and he combines the best of both. As I think as a football broadcaster, and I think that's a big reason why people like him so much. And for me, I think it's been really helpful to have somebody who's such an opposite personality when it comes to us broadcasting football, because I think we complement each other. Well, I try to be more nuts and bolts and describe what's happening, and he comes in with all that energy and that punch, but also describes so well why something happened, and also anticipates, what might happen next. You'll hear him often do what Tony Romo gets credit for doing, and that's say where the ball's going before the snap. So that's been a great experience for me. And we're so different, but yet at the same time, I think when we get in the booth and we start calling the Pats. We're able to find, I think we find that right chemistry, even though we do step on each other, and it's not always him on me. I step on him too, but I don't notice it during the game when I'm calling a play. Very few times do I hear what he's saying during that play. I usually just don't hear it until I get the highlights, on our station during the week. Like when they beat the Saints, I'm screaming Ken Burrell Tompkins, and I didn't hear any of that stuff he's talking about with show ponies and unicorns. And,
that was the best call.
That was the best.
So and people ask me, well, what does it mean? I have no idea. But it seems to work, and I'm really grateful that people like our broadcast, and that we've had a chance to call so many great games together.
You guys are some of the best, it's
for sure.
I really enjoy listening to you guys.
I love it.
Thanks. We have a lot of fun. I really appreciate that. Thank you.
Barry, it's up to you.
Closing time, as they like
All
to
right.
say. So, yeah, definitely. My question is going to be somewhere up that alley. So, what's your favorite behind the scenes moment? Calling the game with Zolak, and your favorite game that you've called as the Patriots, broadcaster.
Oh gosh. Well, I'll answer the second one first. Second part of that first. Kansas City AFC Championship, 2018. Rex
The
Burkhead
good one.
runs it
I
in
like that
overtime.
one.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. It was the Ravens game in 2014, that divisional playoff, and the Patriots were down 14 twice, and they came back and won it.
It's another
Edelman,
legendary
Amendola.
game. Oh yeah.
But to go to Kansas City and win that game in overtime to go to the Super Bowl, that to me, that was the most fun I've had calling the Pats. And I think just there were so many different things about that game, but most of all was being on the road in a stadium that was 99% Chiefs fans. Usually when the Patriots travel, there are a lot of Patriot fans. In that case, it was kind of like it's us against the world. And, with everything on the line. And I think also, a lot of times teams will say nobody believed we could do it. I think Patriots players and coaches obviously thought they were going to go in there and win. But it seemed like the narrative nationally at that point was, well, the Patriots got them early in the year, but they're not going to win in Kansas City.
Mm-hmm.
And that was the sense I got being at the stadium and being in Kansas City, like for a day and a half to call that game. We got in the day before. And so to win that game the way they did, it was just phenomenal. And you're in it's kind of it's a cool thing to go to a stadium. Everybody's yelling at your team as you're going in on the buses. Everybody's rooting against you, and then you get to leave with a big win. Players talk about it all the time, and as a broadcaster, it's not we or they, and I don't get a chance. I'm not out there, but it was still a cool sense being with the Patriots, knowing what was ahead going to the Super Bowl, but also having had that experience of watching them go into Kansas City and do it. And then, the great scene of the McCourty brothers, Devin and Jason, jumping around in circles on the field after the Pats won that game. So that's my favorite game. As far as behind the scenes moments, honestly, the vast majority of them, Barry, aren't what related to actually calling the game per se, or being in the booth and in-game moments. For me, it's the people you meet, the people you get to see around the stadium every day, the people that are on the security staff that, work down on the field or on the press level, or, in security, and fans and honestly, people like yourselves. I mean, it's a very humbling experience to be a broadcaster of a team that has such a passionate following, but also to know that, people, not all. I mean, I hear from people that don't like my work, and I know that's part of the deal, but just to hear from people that appreciate what you do, and the opportunity to meet different people from different backgrounds. I mean, you were telling me a little bit about your background, and, that's the greatest part of what I get to do. The calling the games, it's something I dreamed of doing. And it's something I really take seriously without trying to take myself too serious, that I really, truly appreciate it. But I think more than that, it's just the experience, the opportunity that the job allows me to meet so many different great people. And again, it doesn't necessarily mean famous people, or the guys that I see in the press box in the network booths next to us, or the players that I've had a chance to interview and talk to over the years. And I will say that, like, one little story, you asked me about Zolak, Vlad asked me about Zolak, and behind the scenes thing, when Malcolm Butler intercepted the pass in the Super Bowl.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Super Bowl 49, our booth was right next to the Seahawks, and there's just this glass pane between our booth and the Seahawks booth, and as the game's winding down, the Seahawks announcers are really demonstrative, or at least people in their booth. There's always a producer, and some teams have statisticians and spotters. So there are a lot of people in the booth. So I don't know whether Zolak was going at it with Warren Moon, or Steve Brable, the broadcast team, or just a couple of guys who were on the broadcast crew. But as the game's going along, they're kind of, I see these hand gestures going back and forth. And then looks like the Seahawks are going to win the game, right? Curse makes that phenomenal catch. They get to the 2. And then they throw it, and the ball's intercepted. And Zoe's going nuts, and he's gesturing to them and rubbing in their face. Our producer, Mark Capello, the guy who sits between us, the John reference, he's got me in a bear hug. And I'm screaming, out of my mind, Malcolm Butler intercepted the pass and so forth. And finally, the confetti falls and we shut up and we're ready to go down to the field. And I kept yelling to Mark, did I say Malcolm Butler? Did I get the play right? I have no idea. And he's like, Bob, just enjoy it. So we got to, watch the Patriots celebrate. But that was every game, there are moments. Every game is great. So even a game like Saturday night, even the games that are bad on the scoreboard for the Pats, it's an awesome job.
That's great, man. Thank you for sharing that story. That was pretty awesome.
Yeah, that was a great story. Legendary right there.
All right, I'll let you close it out, John.
Listen, I'm just glad I got to jump on and catch some of this interview. I was on the road trying to get here. I'm like, breaking all kinds of laws to make it in here, because you're the voice of the Patriots, and, we're such big fans of the Patriots, man, and we're life fans of the Patriots. So it was such a pleasure for you to come on and join the Pro Fan Sports Podcast, and I hope we get to talk to you sometime in the future, man. Thank you for your work and, calling these great games, and you live in our living rooms and, in our rooms and everywhere, every Sunday or Saturday or Monday. So we appreciate you, man.
Hey, John, likewise. I really appreciate it. I'm glad you made it too. I'm sorry that, you had to miss part of it. But really appreciate being with you guys, and I would love to do it again.
Awesome. Thank you.
Awesome.
Thank
Definitely.
You so much. Hey, have a wonderful holidays.
You as well.
Holidays,
Merry Christmas.
You as well. You as well. Thank you. And one quick thing, just wanted to say is that, you guys, you and Zolak are the GOATs of broadcasters, and y'all are so good that, because there's a lot of these national guys that aren't as good as y'all. So I'm sure you guys heard this before. What I do a lot of times is when I'm watching the game, I'll have the TV broadcast turned down, muted, and then I'll have the radio broadcast, on full blast, and just listen to you and Zoe call the game as I'm watching it on TV, then having to hear the national guys, we call the game, because, both of them aren't even close to as good as you and Zolak. So, no, I greatly appreciate what you guys do and listen every week, every game. And it's awesome to hear both of you guys call. You guys make it fun and exciting and interesting. There's never a dull moment on the call. So, you definitely keep doing what you're doing. And, and we hope to have many great games and great memories with you and Zolak on the call. And I'm looking forward to seeing what happens, with you guys and with the team, moving forward in the future. And hopefully we can make it to the Super Bowl. Hopefully we, see you guys call another Super Bowl game in the future.
I hope so, Barry. I really appreciate it. And, looking forward to Sunday. It's going to be a lot of fun against the Bills.
Yes, sir.
Absolutely.
Awesome.
And we will win that game. We
All
will.
right. I'm going to hold you to
that.
Have a good night, Bob. Happy holidays.
Thank you so much,
you,
Bob.
John.
Merry Christmas.
Thanks, Vlad.
Happy
Thanks, Barry.
holidays. We'll
You
be
too.
in touch.
Thank you guys so much. Take care. Right. Bye-bye.
You too. Go Pats. Awesome, guys. Awesome.
Yeah, man.
Great stuff.
That was dope. I'm glad, I caught some of that,
Definitely. I'm glad you did too, John.
It seems like
too good of a guest for you, all of us not to be here. I know this was one of those guessing people that, we all needed to be here and experience that. And I'm glad we're all able to do that.
For sure, man. I had to do what I had to do today, but thank you guys for holding it down, man. Thank you guys.
Of course.
For sure.
You already know.
And to the listeners, if you're still listening, thank you for your, continual support, tuning in. We appreciate that. Make sure you're subscribing to the channel. Make sure you're liking and sharing these videos. Make sure you're following us on social media. We're on all platforms at ProFan Sports, at ProFan Sports on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, TikTok, and then we're on Instagram at ProFans_sports. You know, we're always updating you guys and keeping you guys up to date with whatever's going on in the sporting world. So until next episode, man, we'll holla at y'all.
Have a good week, everyone. See y'all next week. Merry Christmas and Happy Holidays.
Merry Christmas.
Yes, sir. Feliz Navidad, as the Spanish people would say.